Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Plympton School Committee meeting to order at 6:02. This evening, I'd like to begin by calling for a nomination for our reorganization. If there's a nomination or a volunteer for the position of chair of the Plympton School Committee.
I nominate Jason Frazier for the position of chair. Is willing to take it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Then all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Appreciate that. At this point, I would entertain any motions for the position of vice chair.
I nominate John Walsh as vice chair.
And do I have a second? Second. Okay. Any further discussion or nominations? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Rob.
I'd love to.
I nominate Rob Montgomery to be the secretary for the school. Second that. Any further nominations? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. It is unanimous. Moving on, there is only the four of us here this evening, but I know because of Dan's work schedule, he would most likely prefer to stay in the slots he's in currently, as he can attend those meetings most easily with his schedule. That would have Dan continuing on as our alternate on policy. He would also be working on sick bank with John, but sick bank is very often just our negotiations team. That is where we're going to have a hole because we're missing Kate now, who is really effective in getting that position. So for negotiations, would it be Dan, yeah, Rob and John?
John, yeah.
With an
Because
alternate?
you've been at all the meetings.
Yeah.
With the alternate being, Dan is on here now. We can leave that alone. Brian, just looking some places, would you want to be on Union 31 when we have the joint meetings with Kingston and Halifax and Silver Lake sometimes? Sounds enjoyable. Okay, so that would keep Rob and John and now Brian as our main people, and I would be the alternate because I'm often there because of my role on Silver Lake. I'd like to retain the position of legislative agent if that's okay with you guys.
I was going to go for it, but I think I'll let you take it.
You really want it?
No.
Okay. Admin review, John, would you like to continue on that or would you like to pass the gavel?
I can continue.
Okay, excellent. So buildings and grounds, Kate's background is literally in buildings and grounds in Capitol. So we have John on there right now.
I would
Dan?
suggest we punish Mr. Wick for leaving me a water project when he left the school committee, and he should now join me back on.
Did you get it figured out?
I did.
Do you have any problem where I love that one? Okay, all right. And again, Pilgrim Area Collaborative, for those of you who don't understand, is it's a quasi-public special ed school, and its board of directors is made up of one school committee member from each of the member towns. It is literally a school committee unto itself with just as many subcommittees as we have here. So that's a huge ask for Dan, and he's been excellent in the role. And if he's willing to maintain it, I'd like to give him the honor of declining or accepting at a later meeting, if that's all right with you guys.
Great.
Excellent. All right, so policy CASA liaison, we'll leave Dan there for now. And I think that gets us to single signature warrants, and I'm happy to stay in that role. Does anybody see anything that I missed? Nope, I think reorg is done.
Thank
Did
you.
we miss anything? Does it sound good to
Can
you?
you just review policy again? Who is going to be the
Yeah, so policy,
second?
I'll stay on policy.
Okay.
And we'll keep Dan as the alternate. And it looks like we have a to be determined if we want someone else who wants to be on policy as well. I don't see any major takers right now, so we'll leave that open.
Okay.
Okay? So Dan and I can both show up and be voting members when he's able to be there.
Okay.
All right, great. So first thing off of our agenda, I do want to acknowledge at this point that we are being recorded by Area 58 and also by our OWL. So any audience members, members of the committee, members of the administration, just to bring us all to knowledge that we are being recorded. Acknowledge our visitors today. Thank you for being here this evening. Did you have anything you'd like to speak to the committee about? Good, great, excellent. Thank you for your time and your dedication to our school and our kids. And thank you for your dedication to our community and being here again with us this evening. Moving on to the approval of minutes from April 28th, 2025. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any discussion? Brian, under parliamentary procedure, you can abstain or you can vote in the affirmative with us. Either one's acceptable. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those against? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Mr. Wick abstains. Correspondence to the school committee, I have received none. Joe? None as well. So moving on to new business. So town meeting items and a recap of where FY25 hopefully is coming to a conclusion after a lot of work. I'd like to acknowledge the timeliness of the information being brought to the school committee from the administration way back in October when we first noticed that there were some anomalies in a very tight budget. Our FY25 budget was constrained by the growth of the Silver Lakes budget and the realignment of Silver Lake and Plympton school committees' responsibilities financially. The town asked us to trim our budget back as much as we thought was sustainable. I know there was a lot of effort and work put into that. And some of the places were places where we saw extraordinary growth. And one of those areas was in the long-term substitute line, where we ended up realizing over $100,000 more in long-term substitutes in FY25 than we had actually budgeted for. And we had used some historic numbers to come up with our budget. We ended up basically having 2 full-time long-term subs in for the 5 long-term leaves at the point I'm referencing throughout the year. An extraordinary amount of people out, which is there right under their contract, but it did catch us unawares, and budgetarily it hit us hard. We also had some additional cost incurred because of special ed. Not all of it being out of district, some of it being needed services within our school district here in the building to maintain the services for students according to their IEP, which is legally required and also the morally right thing to do. In addition to that, we did receive guidance from DESE that we did need to hire an ELL teacher. We were hoping we might be able to contract with someone, and we ended up having to hire our own person to come in and provide services to students who English is not their first language, or both of their parents at home might not speak English as their first language. There's very specific criteria under which kids qualify for ELL services, and it's considered part of their civil rights. So of course, when we realized these needs, we had to address them. Many of you were at the meeting when we went and talked to the Finance Committee. The Board of Selectmen were also at that meeting, and we explained to them in November at a meeting where we were with the budget, and we'd already instituted a freeze here at the Dennett at the behest of our Director of Finance and our Superintendent and Mr. Venito, which was able to save us some money here locally. We also utilized one-time funds that the town had socked away for just such an event, and that was in the Special Ed Reserve Fund, which we had painstakingly built up over the years to about $52,000. And luckily that money was there, but unfortunately we drained $50,000 from that fund. We also pursued extraordinary relief in the form of circuit breaker funding for expenses that are extraordinary, even above and beyond the extraordinary cost of special ed. When you end up spending 130% or more than your expected amount, you can go for additional funds from the state. And we also drew down a fund that had built for a couple of years. It was our rural aid account, which we were hopeful at times during the budgetary process we were going to be able to utilize to help put an HVAC unit on the top of the building, potentially replenish our special ed reserve fund and to help us with our budget overrun for FY25. At the end of the day, unfortunately, the budget overrun was so extreme that ate up the entire regional schools reserve fund that we had built up over the years. I'd like to thank the town administrator. Liz Dennehy was integral in getting all the pieces to work to get us account fund balances and let us know what we could pull on as levers to get through this year. The Finance Committee for their time and their expertise on the town side of budget and the finances available. The Board of Selectmen for agreeing to work with us to release those funds from the Special Ed Stabilization Fund. I'd like to particularly thank Sarah, who literally sat on the phone with me at 9 o'clock at night the night before town meeting to make sure that I understood the motions to be made at special town meeting and where we were financially. Above and beyond, Sarah, thank you very much for that time. I know it came out of your own personal time. I could hear your family around you at home. But I thank you deeply for that clarification to make sure that the motions we made at town meeting could literally get us to June 30. Because there were points throughout this year that I was extremely fearful because of how information was coming into the committee, that I might go through town meeting and then realize we hadn't asked for enough and we were going to end up in the red on June 30th. And I don't honestly know what we would have done if that situation occurred. So there was a lot of teamwork that went into getting us through FY25. A lot of people deserve thanks for their cooperation and the timeliness of the information. But obviously there was still some learning moments along the way, and I think one of the learning moments along the way was just how timely information gets fed back to Sarah's office and then back to the school committee to make sure that the numbers are as accurate as possible when we're trying to make these decisions once a month or once every 6 weeks as school committee members. So that's my major takeaway from the FY25 situation, town meeting. Does anybody else from the committee have anything they'd like to add to this?
I think I'm going to put an exclamation point on your takeaway, because I think we need to, and I have other reasons to say this too, I think we really need to make sure that the information that we have at any point in time is real time. We need to make sure that the numbers are being passed up. If it's not good numbers, they still need to come up as much, if not even more, than numbers that are great. Because because what it feels like at times here is that, we have one school committee meeting and a month later we have another one, and we're another $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 off. And we should be able to see that coming in most instances, or at least know that something doesn't seem right and we're looking into it. And yes, I would also echo your thanks to Sarah for spending some time with us the night before town meeting, which none of us wanted to do, but we did it and we figured out a way through. I think one of the other lessons, this is reading tea leaves, right? But 40% of the town voted to replace a fire station that is no longer functional. And that's a tangible thing that you can touch. That doesn't bode well for a future override, which, again, nobody can touch. You can't point to, well, we're adding 5 more teachers here and 6 more police officers here. If we do an override, it's going to be in order to try and maintain what we have. And even that is probably going to be more expensive year over, for an annual increase to people's taxes than what was being asked for the fire station. And so that doesn't give me much hope there. So we also, I don't think, expect any significant, there are some houses being built, which will be some incremental growth that will come into the town, but there isn't anything huge on the horizon to boost the new growth over 2.5%. So I think we have a much healthier budget for the coming fiscal year. And that's a step up from where we were walking into last year. But I do think we have some big challenges ahead, both for Dennett and for Silver Lake, you know, and our region as a whole, across all three towns. It's gonna not be easy, but I think as long as we keep up good communication and we understand that financially, you know, there isn't any more room under the levy than what will be 2.5% plus new growth next year. And maybe there'll be a little extra free cash, who knows, but that's not enough to sustain any significant increases. And so that will be very difficult if we have to try and go down that path, or if we have to put up a choice of here is what can be afforded, or here is what would happen if we only stick with, you know, with what we can fund out of the budget. And I hope we don't get there, and maybe we'll finally see a turn in our sort of rainy days that we seem to have had the last few years. But I think that's a reality that we need to look at from a business management perspective and budget perspective for the next year.
Well, I think as a school committee, who's the closest to the admin and the functioning of the school, I think it would be our job to look at what it would take to continue to run the school at the level that it's at currently. And if that requires an override, that we present all of that information to our town, and if it's the three towns, of exactly what an override would get them, right? And we would then have the same obligation to say, this is what a 2 would get you. If we did a 2 overall cost of education between the assessment of Silver Lake and your local elementary committee's budget, what would that look like? And our job isn't necessarily to try and convince people of one or the other, but to give them all of the facts and information so they can make an educated decision. One of the biggest problems I've seen with a lot of the overrides that have been going around the South Shore and Massachusetts in general is they've literally been a one-year stopgap measure. I think the towns, in working with us as a school department, would be wise to look at a way to make an override be something that could sustain the budgets of the town and the schools for 3 or more years, 3 to 5 years. So it's a little early now. I mean, budget season for FY27 for some of us has already begun. I know that I've already started leaning into legislation on that front. But let's take a breath at this moment and realize we do have a much healthier budget where we're coming out this year. Appreciate the town acknowledging and understanding why we asked for the percentage increase for the Dennett that we did, and acknowledge the fact that it got a unanimous vote at town meeting, right? But like John's trying to say, the ability to answer that call next year without a more substantial ask and override is not something that is in the cards at all, right? So we might have to present communities with 2 budget options, educate them to the best of our ability, and leave the vote to them of where they want us to be in FY27, the 26-27 school year. But let's get to the 25-26 school year first.
And just to level set so that we have an idea of what that means. You know, what was presented for the fire station was a $660,000 net increase spread out across the taxpayers.
Right.
And that was a $485 a year per average household. So that you just have to think about that, and that starts to give you ideas of what that is for budget swings. Right. And if you're going to do an override, and we're at 40,000 for 1% right now. 43,000.
43.
So it doesn't take long over a few years to very quickly eat up that amount of money.
Right.
And that amount of money was not palatable. Don't know what amount is, and maybe none was, but it isn't a big window.
No, and lessons learned from votes that have been cast, but also it doesn't preclude us from looking
No,
to
no.
the future and making plans.
Well, and we need to provide that information because it needs, the finance committee needs to understand, the selectmen need to understand, and even more so, the voters need to understand what they're voting for or not voting for.
Right.
And it's ultimately their choice.
Agreed.
But yeah, and I think, this goes back to, just like Catherine, unfortunately this year, and hopefully it doesn't in our coming year, as knowing early helps us be able to provide information. Because if we figure out in February that we need to present these options, it's too late. Because you need more time to be able to let everyone absorb and walk into the process. I mean, that's part of what happened this time is that, the town administrator and the finance committee walked into the budget season understanding that they had this hanging over.
Mm-hmm.
And so you saw a very small town meeting warrant, very tight, very fiscally prudent in order to be able to absorb the cost for the schools. But that only happens so many times. So let's hope for sunny days.
Let's hope. Let's hope. Any other takeaways from the committee members on town meeting? Awesome. Thank you. Moving on to reports of standing committees, admin review.
I think we're still trying to have a meeting tomorrow, but that has not been fully set. There's quorum issues and
Understood.
issues.
Okay. Policy has had no meeting recently. Negotiations.
Negotiations are still underway. Our next meeting is Thursday. Hopefully it'll conclude final negotiations.
Excellent.
We also had negotiations with the aides as well, so I think we'll be talking about that in executive session.
Okay. Any Union 31 updates? Nope. Okay. PAC, Dan is not here. Capital improvements, legislative agent. So the Senate budget has come out and they restored rural aid back to 16.5 million, but also included the deeper investment that the House had started with the per pupil minimum increment. So our Chapter 70 funding has gone up here locally, and also we should be able to lean into the $62,000 in rural aid that we said we would commit to the operating budget. On June 2nd, or 3rd, I'm not sure, the Joint Committee on Education is going to be hearing the rural aid bill. That's the bill I've mentioned several times to you in the past that would increase the current funding level from $16.5 million to $62 million if passed. This is a hearing of the Joint Committee on Education. This isn't a rules hearing, and it's not being taken up on the floor by the House or the Senate, but this is one of the preliminary hurdles any bill has to go through to get approval. So I will be submitting written testimony on behalf of Dennett to forward that bill for a vote probably next spring to include in the FY27 state budget. Single signature warrants.
There is a warrant circulating for signatures totaling $75,249.80, which I will bring to the town tomorrow morning. We are currently in sync with the town's warrant schedule, so nothing will be going out digitally.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah.
Before we move on, I think maybe it makes sense, starting with the next meeting, to add regionalization on here as a way to be able to report back.
As a standing committee?
Yep.
Sure.
So we did have an initial meeting sort of to try and determine the way forward, and we are looking to meet, I believe, I just saw today, with the Collins Group out of UMass on the 18th.
Okay.
They apparently are sort of pre-qualified, so if we decide to go with them, we don't need to go down the process of doing an RFP or any of that sort of stuff. So not too much else to report, but we should do that so I can feedback some
So noted.
bits.
All right. Perfect.
Not to belabor that, but regionalization between the three towns, is that what you're getting?
There was some funds that were acquired by Halifax and Kingston, and now it's sort of been turned over to Kingston to run with those funds to do a study of full regionalization.
At the elementary level, as well as obviously.
Yeah. But again, the the discussion that we had quite a bit a few weeks ago was really that this is to do this study to get the facts and to be able to sort of, as Jason was laying out about, override one budget versus another, be able to lay it all out so that we can kind of understand what all the facts are, and then people can make their decisions. But again, the focus at this point is really on engaging with a consultancy group to dig through and figure out what we're talking about. Because clearly there's a certain large segment of the budget that regionalization doesn't change. And so what are you really talking about from the part of the budget that could change, and what kind of savings could you see, and go through all of those different pieces and so on. So Collins Group we've used a couple times in town for different studies. They did the whole financial thing. So I think some of the other towns have used them as well. So if it is the pleasure of the committee, then that would be kind of a great way to go and get that going and see where that takes us.
All right. So we will add that to our report of standing committees moving forward until the conclusion of that work. Moving over to the administration, do we have a CASA update?
They're in the midst of fundraising for the fun run right now. We've had parent volunteers that's been here in the morning for drop-off, out of recess, pumping the kids up for our third fun run. I believe the goal was $25,000. As of today, they're around $11,000, with the ultimate goal being that the students, more accurately, the teachers would get to slime either Mrs. Marcolini or myself, or both.
Oh,
So it's motivating.
absolutely. Absolutely. Mr. Venito, do you have a report?
I do indeed.
Thank you, Peter.
Currently, we sit at 252 students enrolled at Dennett. As of Friday, we are completely done with MCAS testing for this school year. We are currently in the midst of finishing spring benchmark testing. I can speak to that a little bit more in a moment. But as you can imagine, at the end of the year, we have an awful lot of things happening, all good stuff, all fun stuff, and I'll try to go through that right now. Thursday, May 29th, we have Ride Your Bike to School Day. I think I mentioned this last month. This has turned, what started as a rather small event has turned into a huge undertaking. We would not be able to do this without Plympton Police, Plympton Fire. The kids start over at the old historical or old townhouse building. Roads are closed down. They're sent in shifts over to the school. It has become huge. Very popular. Almost all students, or all students, have the ability, if they would like to participate. We've had a number of parents that have joined the last couple of years. It's turned into a really fun event. It's big, but it's a great take. As I mentioned a minute ago, we also have our fun run scheduled for that same day. That's basically an all-day event with staggered times per grade level, just so that we're not congesting the field out here too much. That same day, the 29th, is something that I've come to enjoy an awful lot. We have the senior parade that comes through. So graduating Silver Lake seniors get a chance to come back to their home elementary schools, walk the hallways, talk to certain teachers. I think the teachers are looking forward to it perhaps even more than the students do, but the students that do come back, it's always great to see them catch up and find out where they're going, what the future holds. It's awesome, and I'm glad that the high school is able to do that. On Friday the 30th, we have Future Laker Day. That's basically field day for grade 6 up at Halifax Elementary School, where kids from KIS, Halifax, and Dennett all come together and participate in various field events. Kids are all mixed up on different teams, so they get to start to meet kids from the other buildings. Great team building event. Every year that I've been able to get up there and just observe a little bit, it's very well done. Our PE teachers, some aides go up. Again, huge undertaking. You're talking 200 to 300 kids, I would venture to guess, and they make it work, and it's a huge success every year. That leads to Tuesday, June 3rd. We have our field day here at Dennett for grades kindergarten through grade 5. Our younger students will go in the morning, that's kindergarten through grade 2. And then grades 3 through 5 will have their field day in the afternoon. Wednesday, June 4th, we have our spring chorus concert at 6 o'clock. And we're going to try running our art show before and after the concert. While we have a crowd here, we're hoping to be able to display the students' work. Thursday, June 5th, we have an early release day, 12:30 dismissal, lunch will be served. Friday, June 6th, it's Step Up Day, where grade 6 students will actually have their teams, their schedules. They go up to the middle school, start to walk through what their next year is going to look like, get a look at their lockers, get to know some of the procedures, expectations. I give an awful lot of credit to the middle school. They do a lot to get our students ready for the next step at the middle school level. Thursday, June 12th is our moving on ceremony at 5 o'clock here. Knock on wood, since we've been doing this event outdoors, we have had fabulous weather, and I'm hoping that that stays the same. If we have to move inside, we can do that, but hoping to be outside. And then Friday the 13th, sounds ominous, but it's not. It's our last day of school. Again, half day with a 12:30 dismissal, and lunch will be served. So from now, essentially until the end of the year, there is something for everybody, and I think our students will really enjoy the last couple of weeks of school here.
That sounds like a busy but exciting schedule, Mr. Venuto.
It's a nice way to say it.
Do you have a presentation you're going to make to us this
I do.
evening as well? Do you need a minute to get yourself ready?
30 seconds would be great.
All right.
Thank you. So one of the things that I feel like we as a district have really honed in and started to do a really nice job with the last few years is looking at data throughout the school year, not just looking at MCAS. It used to be the MCAS was the end-all be-all, and that was more of an autopsy. You couldn't do much with it at that point. It was over, it was done with. The fact that we have various data points that we can look at throughout the school year, make changes as necessary, put interventions into place as necessary where we see fit. I feel like we've done a really nice job with that. So I will share this information with you. So this is our DIBELS testing this school year, the 24-25 school year. I'm going to stand if that's all right.
And DIBELS is a reading assessment, correct, Peter?
Correct. This is basic early literacy. So we have our scores from the fall. This is percentage of meeting or exceeding expectations. And as you can see, we did testing in the fall. We did testing in January. Just the way that our schedule falls, as I mentioned earlier, we're completing our end of the year testing right now. We were off schedule-wise by a matter of days, but that's fine. We can share that data at another time. I think we have enough here that tells the story of what are we doing well and what are some things we need to work on. So as you can see, we've had some nice improvements. Kindergarten had a nice gain. Grade 1 had a nice gain. Grade 2 is already, our typical district goal is to hit 70% or better. As of January, they were hitting 73% of our students were making the mark, meeting expectations or exceeding. A couple of factors go into that, and I'll get into that in just a moment. Grade 3 was a little bit more stagnant, which we did take a good hard look at, and I can get into that a little bit more.
So just real quick,
Go ahead.
50%, the 50 number is percentage of exceeding?
Meeting or exceeding expectations, it's a combined number on it.
Okay.
Oh, sure. So one of the other things that we wanted to do was take a look at, okay, we can compare this year to this year, but also we wanted to take a look at how were we doing last year versus how we're doing this year. This got a little bit tricky in that, again, we're working out the kinks of the testing schedule. When are we administering the testing? So last year, our middle of the year, that's the MOI, middle of the year testing was done in March, whereas this year, in order to better accommodate, a lot of people tied their professional goals in with data, which is great. That's what we want people shooting for. Unfortunately, what we found out the hard way last year is that we weren't allowing an appropriate amount of time to get as much data as we needed by the time that goals were to be evaluated. So as we started to play with the schedule a little bit, we had to make some adjustments, nothing major, but it does show a little bit of a shift. So middle of the year last year was actually done in March, versus this year, middle of the year was done in January.
Did you change the total amount of times you were assessing the kids, or you just adjusted the time?
Just adjusted the time frame.
Okay.
So 3 times each year.
But still within the recommended amount of time between testing periods?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Not a lot of movement in K and 1. Some movement in grade 2, some movement, but not quite the direction that we were looking for in grade 3. If you recall, you may not.
But these are different cohorts also, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Our grade 3 scores historically have been very solid the last 2 years. They have hit that 70 mark. So we start to look at, well, what's happening here? Because when we looked at Dibbles, had conversation, spoke to interventionists, took a look at this information with our curriculum coordinator, Brian DeSantis, something wasn't adding up. A couple different reasons for that. Grade 3 was not quite historically as phonetically based. Typically, students were coming to them after K1 and 2, teachers that were fully trained, Orton Gillingham, that were applying those skills on a daily basis. Whereas historically, or at least the last few years, in grade 3, they didn't need to rely on those skills. The students were showing up with those skills, I don't want to say mastered, but a much better understanding of the Orton Gillingham process, procedure. But as soon as they saw that there was this drop in the Dibbles, like I said, grade 3 came to us and said, well, we're not employing a ton of the OG stuff. We never have. We've never had to. They were trained. It just didn't apply to them. So the next logical question for us was, well, what else is this telling us? Again, Dibbles is dynamic indicators of basic early literacy. So this tells us one component of what's happening. So if you go ahead to the star reading, which again, fall, winter, and then the difference. Grade 2 was doing a very solid job. That grade 3 that was showing deficits in Dibbles, they were still showing a fair amount of growth when it came to looking at their star results. They were already, by winter of this year, they were already at 59. That kind of gave us some more questions other than we were, again, looking at as many whys, as many hows. There was quite a different dynamic between high need students in some grade levels. Like I said, we had one grade level that just came in seemingly slightly more prepared to master the next series of skills that they needed to. And as I said before, grade 3 historically has been one that has been a very high performing grade. So as they dug in here, I'm very anxious to see what these star scores look like when we get these May results here. Because again, despite the fact that some of the Dibble scores were trending in the wrong direction, we're still seeing these numbers are moving in the right direction. So it was very interesting to dig into.
Peter, what's the acronym for STAR? Or how does it compare to Dibble?
Dibbles is literally just early literacy. This is more reading for comprehension, reading for understanding. More of the skills that you might see in grade 3 and beyond, whereas grades K through 2, those are kind of like the building blocks. By the time we hit grade 3, where the expectation is, okay, we've mastered those building blocks, and now we're ready to go ahead, apply those skills, and start to do some higher level things with that.
Can I add to that?
Yes,
I administer
please.
Dibbles.
Thank you.
So Dibbles is one-on-one with an adult, and the stars don't have a computer, so the kids are left. Sometimes if they have questions, they can get it read to them, or they read for themselves and answer for themselves.
Yeah, and I think definitely one of the strengths of Dr. Peru and her team has been the data analysis team. So you might be burying your lead here, or you might be coming to this, but my question is not so much concern or disappointment in seeing some of the negative numbers from test period 1 to test period 2, but how did that inform how you strategically utilized your staff to try and address those needs?
That's a very fair question. I think automatically we went to some of the lower scores. Well, why? And your point is well taken. Not that we ignored the higher scores, but for something like this with the grade 3 kind of anomaly, that immediately put grade 3 on alert. Something's not right here. They brought that forward to our data team and said, we're doing essentially the same thing. They recognized fully that it was a different group that they had this year, different skill set, but they were the ones that came up with, we need to dedicate a little bit of time to this. They started to apply some more of the OG skills from, let's call it winter, up until this point now. So, as I said, I'm very anxious to see what they have to show us for the end of the year results.
But there was definitively adjusting to practice based on the data
Absolutely.
and what you were seeing.
Absolutely, yes.
Can I add to that too?
Please.
Marty, here we go.
Well, I
Appreciate you being here this evening, yeah.
This is my area of expertise. So what we've done for third grade specifically is we go into the classroom now instead of pulling out small groups, because we notice as a whole the students needed more help rather than kind of like a small cohort of students. So myself and a special ed teacher go into each of the third grade classrooms every day for 30 minutes. We do kind of a mix of phonics review and then sort of like Greek roots, like morphology, the study of the language. Instead of with a small group of students, it's with the whole class.
So you're doing a push-in model and you're treating it more like a tier 1 instead of a tier 2 or tier 3
We noticed
intervention.
These numbers showed kind of a global lead rather than a small.
Yeah, I just love knowing that we're adapting to the data in front of us and how we're trying to bridge that gap that we see in students. So thank you for illustrating that more clearly.
And I think it's important, Jason, to highlight also, my eye, again, is quickly drawn to the things that need improvement where that shouldn't necessarily be the first go-to. But even as I look at the January numbers, again, the goal being 70% for the K through 3, we're at 57, which is not quite where we want to be, obviously, for grade 3. But again, when I come back and I start to look at, well, this gives us some insight into, okay, well, that gives us a little bit more insight. And some of these numbers are in really good shape. If they were to continue the trend they're on, grade 2, that's looking fantastic. Grade 3, great. A couple of smaller losses in 4, 5, and 6, but I think each one of the teams is having the more in-depth conversation. Why is this happening? What can we do to change it? Who can bring, as Marty said, who can bring a level of expertise to assist us and get these interventions into place?
Yeah. And I mean, we're going to face this with budgetary questions moving forward, and being able to say it's not a one-size-fits-all. We're not just throwing people and money at things. We're strategically positioning our best staff members in the places of highest need. We're acknowledging areas of strength in some of our teams to share that information with other teams. I think that's a bigger part of the message that needs to be in the community. And having a presentation like this, Peter, is so important to that end goal of just having the support from the community. To see inside the building, even from this high-level overview, that you're addressing the needs specifically and multi-points throughout the year you're taking this data, and there's dedicated staff members who are analyzing this and coming up with action plans.
Absolutely.
I think, in future too, in showing this, one thing that I think is helpful is to put, you can't really do it on the, year over year, but for the each year is to put the number of students in the class, because I do know we still have some variability in the class sizes, and if you're looking at numbers with 30 kids versus numbers with 20 kids, you're getting a much bigger swing in that class size if it's 20 or 22 kids than 35. Right? Each child, where they score, has that impact to push up or down. And so it's just the issue we always have with our data sets here, because we have such a small.
And that was a conversation that I had briefly with Dr. Clifford. There was one MCAS day. Once upon a time, we took MCAS and such happened. But I had to explain we were having one student that was having a very challenging day. And I said, this person is one of 24. That's better than 4%, which, with math, we all get that. And it's funny because when I talk to my colleagues in larger buildings, all right, one kid was having a tough day. I'm like, no, you don't understand. One child in this building having a tough day makes it look as if things are not, it doesn't paint or in my opinion, doesn't paint an accurate picture about what that child knows, what that child's able to do, how hard the teachers have worked, the interventions we put into place. It's
or the scoring for the grade.
Correct.
So I just think it's important, particularly because of our small class size, and that we do have a spread.
I'll try to include that, John.
Yeah.
So with the help of Mr. DeSantis, we went through the district undergoing a lot of, I think, very necessary changes and just revamping, looking at how we're doing things and how can we do them better. Some of the things that we have for action steps moving forward, we're creating a structured, consistent K-2 phonics instruction model, which includes dedicated minutes to Orton, Gillingham, and Hegarty. As I mentioned, the grade 3 team immediately said we need to lean on that a little bit more based on the numbers that we're seeing. I said, great, lean away. We're looking at increased language arts blocks to include additional opportunities to blend phonics, reading, and writing instruction. Grade levels will continue to align curriculum to DESI reading standards. Another newer idea, something we've tried in years past, has not gotten full traction. District writing benchmarks will continue in 25-26 to assess student performance in the narrative, informational, and opinion writing modes. And I say it that way because we've had a couple of different programs that attempted to do exactly this. And I think they were met with a fair amount of success. I feel like with the people and the training that we have in place right now, I feel like we're in a much better spot to be successful with this. Because writing, it can either make or break your ELA scores. And historically, it tends to break. After this year, the literacy needs assessment, the K-12 literacy plan was drafted and will be implemented starting in 25-26 in the areas of leadership, assessment, tiered instruction, professional learning, and family engagement. This is a huge undertaking for the entire district. I know that Brian has worked with teachers from all grade levels from across the district to try to make sure that we're finding time for people to meet, to have conversations. What's working in your building, what's working here, what can we do collectively to make this process work better for all involved. The literacy plan includes a thorough English language arts core program review in grades K through 12. We will continue to improve the MTSS process to target specific phonics, reading, and writing skills for individual students to provide interventions and support. Something I feel like we do fairly well. I can move on. take a look at some math numbers now. So again, this is this year's students, fall, winter, the difference here. I do always like to look at this number down here, the collective number. Grades 2 through 6 are, if you add them together, at 62 proficient or better, or meeting or exceeding expectations rather. Not a ton of movement outside of grade 2. As I stated, they have a unique group this year that is performing very well. But some of these numbers, we're knocking on that 70% already. And I'm, again, very anxious to see what we can do for the end of the year. So again, this is the middle of the year comparison, March of 24 to January 25. Biggest area of concern right here is a 7-point drop in grade 4. And again, collectively, we're looking at 58% meeting or exceeding expectations. And again, this is that tricky, well, in my opinion, it's a little more tricky to compare. Again, this one was given in March, this one was given in January. It's only a matter of 5 or 6 weeks, but that can make a lot of difference too. I'm sorry, this is the math. We were just looking at reading. Again, down at the bottom, from last year to this year, these numbers are all in good shape for middle of the year. And again, we're not just focusing on ELA, but we're also continuing to work on our math. We're going to continue to analyze state and district math data to determine strengths and areas for improvement in overall results and specific math standards at each grade level. Increase math instruction and learning time to include additional math workshop opportunities where teachers can differentiate instruction to meet the needs of each student. One of the things that Brian and I talked about was some of the ideas behind trying to make sure that we're getting a little bit more of an even time frame between ELA and math. We certainly dedicate a huge amount of time to ELA, K through 6. We don't want to fall behind in anything, obviously, but math certainly we don't want to fall any further behind. And again, after a K through 6 math core program review conducted this year, districts will implement a new math curriculum starting in 25-26. Teachers will receive high-quality professional development to implement the new math program. We'll continue the MTSS process to target specific math skills for individual students to provide interventions and support. So we do have a brand new math program that's coming in this year. According to the state of Massachusetts, the program that we're going with does a better job of aligning to the math standards a little bit better than the program that we had previously. So we should inherently see some better results shortly. One of our next upcoming meetings, like I said a few times, I'm looking forward to sharing the end of the year results. I'm very hopeful that we hit that 70 across the board. I feel like we will definitely make improvement, and there's always room for improvement.
Any questions for Mr. Benito? I have a request. Our next meeting is the closeout meeting
Yes.
in the middle of July. I don't know if you're going to be available for that meeting. So what I would like to see from you is just the updated data from the spring test results.
Sure.
So we could compare the fall to the winter to the spring and see where we end up. I appreciated seeing how the different times that you did the data changed some of the information potentially. I don't think that needs to be included. You made that point very clearly. So just this school year's data for the assessments that you just shared with us, so we can see how close we did get to the 70 by the end of the year in the different grade levels, and we have some context of, as those kids move up, where we might be seeing some additional needs or some additional standouts.
You will have it.
Thank you, Mr. Benito.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Question I have.
Yeah, Brian.
I'm not a numbers guy, so I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I do know that statistical difference is something. Is that something that analysis could be done? So like a -7 or whatever number we have, you might say, well, yeah, it's down -7, but statistically it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean?
So, I guess to talk from a different perspective than statistical, coefficients, if I'm remembering my stats class correctly.
Yeah, that's what my stats class a long time ago.
The STAR data is actually pretty well correlated with MCAS, and so we find it to be more predictive than DIBELS. But DIBELS nonetheless helps us with those fundamental building block pieces, so we didn't want to eliminate that, but it's not particularly predictive of MCAS. The STAR is more predictive because on MCAS you're going to be reading, you're going to be writing, you're going to be comprehending, whereas DIBELS is more of the skill, the building block type of identifications and those things. So when he puts things as meeting and exceeding, that also basically just gives you a sense of how we might fare on MCAS. That's why he's grouping them into those categories, because we want all of our students to meet or exceed the state standards. And the goal that we had set to improve since COVID was to really try to make sure that all of us are getting to at least 70% by the end of the school year. So, yes, we can run statistically significant data, but at this point, we're just at the beginning of, let's say, maybe 3 years of having data teams. And so, having this benchmark data and providing the interventions and working in the classroom in terms of what will help students learn and grow and what areas they might need more of and what areas we're doing a great job with, and sharing best practices is actually in some ways more helpful to the classroom teacher than the statistical significance.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So you're really, 70 is what you're after.
That's our big goal.
And the percent change, or the change really is not as important as trying to get to that 70. So
To us in our everyday work.
yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. And I just want to say, with the data analysis that's been occurring, is one of the most exciting pieces I've seen as a school committee member. I will never discount the gut feeling and the anecdotal data coming out of a classroom from a veteran teacher, but how often that ends up correlating with what the data shows, and the data is easier to talk about in a lot of ways, and really put those resources where Mr. Benito needs to put them for his kids. We're making progress in the right direction, even the fact that we're looking at this and taking, a baseline in the fall and then coming back and looking at it at the end of the year. Like Peter said, MCAS is a post-mortem. You get it the next year, right? Not saying the data is not valuable. We use it as much as possible, but multi-times throughout the year where you can course correct at the drop of a hat is really where you need to be. And it's great to see us continuing to lean into that as a district. So I'm proud of the entire administrative team for the effort put into this and getting closer and closer to those 70 numbers. It might be a lofty goal. It might take us a while to get there, but it's a noble goal to have. And the more of them we hit, the better. Chris.
Part of the new Department of Education, where they look at their compliance with IDEA, is looking at the learning gaps. So this data, you might want to break it down to the subgroups and the special education subgroups to see what the gaps are, because we do need to close those gaps, and that we will be judged on that with their IDA.
Yeah, that's another good next step to have, the data ready for that kind of scrutiny. Thank you.
So I have
question.
one other
Go ahead.
thought that came out of the discussion we had here. I thought the little anecdote, not an anecdote, but giving a little bit of background into some of the things that you're doing here, Peter, I think that's something you should think about in talking with the staff about whether that becomes something that we bring to a school committee meeting each meeting. 3 to 5 minute, just, hey, this is some of the stuff that we're doing that isn't just kids are coming in, going to the classroom, teacher, going home. You know, there's work that's being done here that I don't think any of us have any idea of, and I bet a lot of the parents, and certainly most of the town, doesn't have any idea of the work that you're doing with a small staff in a small school. And I think every opportunity we have to highlight that, I wouldn't put on a big show of it, but I think that's going to be really valuable, and it's going to be really important to be able to explain what we're spending and why we're spending it. And that we're doing it and coming up with creative solutions on the fly in order to address things like that. And so, you know, if it could be at every meeting, then that would be great. If not, then do when we can. But I would encourage that to be something that it's more meaningful to people than us just saying, oh, we need to do this, we have this MCAS score. It tells us that people in this building, which I know, the people in this building are doing everything they can to give the best possible education to the students of the town. So
I fully agree, and that, I think you were the one who said how the fire station is a little more tangible, and the town voted it down. And what happens in this school is very hard to make it tangible.
Yeah.
This is a tangible explanation of what goes on a daily basis, and I think that's going to be very important to educate, not just because we have a tough budget year. I mean, going
we should
forward,
be doing
just
it
makes
anyways.
sense. Yeah.
I don't think people understand, and I don't think people understand, well, what is a reading specialist, or what is, they don't, it just,
Yeah.
I mean, look,
Yeah.
I'm thrilled that we got a unanimous vote for the budget at town meeting. Someone should have asked something. I mean, they really should have. So they're not paying attention, and so when you turn around to then ask, that's where I get concerned. So these stories, one, they help educate us to be able to talk to our finance committee, to our board of selectmen about some of the stuff that's going on here. But then there's stories that we can pick up on, and for those that are even taking the time to watch, get to understand sort of the value that's happening in the building, both from classroom teachers as well as specialists and aides. Any story. I just think we're going to try and bring that home a little bit.
Okay, so great idea, but there's logistics behind that. So first,
I understand
if
that.
you guys could pass the message to the
So
staff.
it's not, and again, we're talking.
Second, if you agree to do it, I will put it at the beginning of the agenda, and I will excuse anybody who participates to leave right away afterwards, acknowledging it would be above and beyond. But I do see the value moving forward, especially if we have to ask the town to make tough decisions next year. So I know you said holistically it would be great all the time,
Yeah.
but
I mean, my
asking
hope
our
is
staff
you
to come
can-
out at 6 o'clock and
You
give
can
us...
also line it up with whoever's covering the meeting too.
Agreed. There's ways to logistically work this out, but we'll have to have
It's a
some conversations behind the scenes.
No one gets docked the merit. Doesn't happen.
Another suggestion would be,
It's okay?
if you wanted end of the year data, just kind of look at the school committee dates. I know those are probably set in stone, but if you wanted, we're usually done with end of the year assessments by like this last week of May, first week of June.
Right.
So I don't know if you wanted to change. If
I
you
would
wanted
love
have
to,
that date.
but I just looked over Superintendent Prue's shoulder when she
It's a
had her
suggestion.
calendar of meetings up, and I almost passed out because there was so many different colors on her screen, and they were smushed together and overlapping. I was trying not to spy, but I couldn't help it. And part of the reason why we have the meeting so quick after the election is for the reorganization, because technically until today we were rudderless. Like, we didn't have a chair until we officially redesignated who the chair would be. We've had some situations at Silver Lake in particular where we waited a little while. We had some important business come up. we were able to take care of it, but that's logistically why we have the meeting now. And then we try and give you guys and our admin people some time to do the year-end reports and everything and have our meeting in July. So I would love the report in person, but I'd be just as happy to get it in writing, and I can share it and make it part of the official record. So we just have that information next year when Peter does the presentation, so we can look at the cohort changes and see the improvements year over year. But good ideas on all fronts. Thank you for the participation, Alex.
Question, and this isn't to belittle anything that you guys were saying before. I'm confused as to why 70% is that. And we wouldn't be shooting for all of the children that are not developmentally, not sure that would keep them from passing the test. Why we wouldn't be shooting for 100% of the students that are able to pass the test to that should pass the test.
I would love to answer that question, but I'm going to defer to the superintendent because I know she has an eloquent answer to that.
Well, I agree with you completely. And we struggled with this as an administrative team. I personally struggled with this as superintendent. But looking at our scores coming out of COVID and recognizing the percentages that we would have to leap in order to get to 70, we had a collaborative process. And Pete will tell you, I held on to 100%, but I also had to listen to reason from the people that I work with as well. There are some people who believe that this goal was too lofty. I don't, because if I don't believe in 100%, who will? Right? So I need everybody to believe in 100%. If it helps people to get there quicker by breaking it down to 70 before we get to 100, so be it. But we will.
Not the kindergarten kids. So let's just use kindergarten for example. COVID to them is enough, right?
Right.
And so why not incrementally step that in as like kindergarten, we shoot for 95%.
So once they get to 70, each grade level should set new goals. But you have to remember that when we first set this goal, we were looking at 40 and 50% meeting and exceeding. So it seemed like a more reasonable ask without sending our staff into complete panic, but setting a lofty goal for ourselves. But I agree, and those goals, if we were to meet them today, if every grade were to meet them today, I'm going to be pushing for higher, and I know that Pete will be pushing for higher because we're not satisfied with where we are. We want to just keep improving, and we owe that to our students.
Sure, but I mean, we're not even at 70% now, but we're scoffing at it.
I scoff at it. Pete scoffs at it. We all scoff at it. We all say, what can we do differently? How can we reach the students who are struggling? The scoffing isn't discussed. It's more of what can we do to help this particular child who's struggling in this area grow? What can we do to help these students grow? What can we do differently because we clearly didn't meet the mark here? So we take it very seriously.
Yeah, and I would say even the questions from the committee weren't saying that everything is exactly where we want it to be. Trying to be constructive with the feedback and to understand what the school's already doing that I haven't even seen the results of yet, because this data is months old at this point, right?
Some of the things I'll talk about will be addressing that move forward above 70 to 70 and beyond.
Yeah. And I was part of the conversations with the superintendent on that, and I can attest to the fact she was not satisfied with the 70%. But we do need to set incremental goals that are attainable. So every once in a while we can high five, maybe not have a party, maybe not have a big celebration in town, but high five and say, we're moving the needle in the right direction. The goal of 100% is idealistic, not realistic. We should push for it, but we will never attain it because of the kid having the bad day.
Yeah.
Right? Or, the test just didn't speak to the child the way that the child understood how to demonstrate their understanding. We'll always have those little complications that will prevent us from hitting that 100%. But as long as we're moving in a positive direction, and even if every once in a while we backslip We can identify why we think it happened and what are we doing to try and continue moving forward. As a school committee member and as an educator, I will be very satisfied to support what Dennett is doing in that regard. Again, you're not wrong. We wish we could set the bar high, but we need those incremental moments, especially in education today.
What is the benchmark for that?
What is the benchmark for what?
A state benchmark for it.
For the DIBELS?
Yeah.
Well, the DIBELS is a norm referenced standardized test that's given throughout the nation. So that data is compiled not just at the state level.
Okay.
So we're balancing out, and Dr. Clifford and Dr. Prue, I'm sure you could speak to this as well. We're balancing out against a massive data set of peer-alike, age-alike students from across the nation.
Yeah, I mean, in particular, all of these things, whether it's DIBELS, it's looking at phonics and reading fluency, or it's STAR, which is looking more at comprehension, or it's MCAS, they're all different in some ways. They help us know how we're doing in real time, like you described. And then MCAS is more, as you know, more of a general look overall how we're doing. Really with MCAS, this depends on different districts, how they set what they want to achieve. Generally speaking, I've been in districts that sometimes shoot for 80% or higher, right? That may be a bar we would say, 80% or higher, right? We want X number of kids in the combined area on MCAS and exceeds and proficient combined to be at least 70 or 80%. That's sort of, in the state of Massachusetts, when you're getting to that point, you're getting 80 or above, you're really getting to the top, you're getting to the top tier of schools across the Commonwealth that are scoring that high. They're often commended by the Department of Education. There's a whole piece to that. If you're falling really below, that's problematic, and that's when, as Chris said, sometimes if your subgroup data is not good, that's something that you need to look at. So we're looking at least 70%, moving it even higher as we go along. But I've been in districts where, let's say you're at 68% on the 10th grade MCAS. It can take 5 years in some ways to get to 80%. That's just been my own experience. And that's with new math curriculums, professional development, like a multi-tiered approach to a complex problem that's beyond just, hey, I'm going to give you a new curriculum, I want you to go do it. And so it's like you're going to come at it from all different fronts to get even that 12% increase over 5 years. It can be done, obviously, and we'll always achieve to do it, but it takes a lot of things that have to be strategically done. And that's why at the beginning of the year I talked about the curriculum review cycle and how important that was, because it's budgetary pieces too, as you've seen this year, that need to line up to make these things happen in a timely way, so that even 5 years seems like a long time, and it is, but in order to achieve that, there has to be some strategic pieces to that.
Yeah, bringing up an adoption of a new curriculum. That's often sometimes when you actually see a backslide in scores for a year as the adjustment to practice for the teachers takes effect and they get more comfortable. They gain fidelity with the new program. So totally hearing what you're saying. We are pushing for all of our kids to be proficient or beyond in reading and math at the Dennett and in Silver Lake.
I would also say that I'm really impressed with the way that the staff works together to open and honest about their scores, to work together, to be willing to share what's working, what's not working. That foundation of trust is critical to their ongoing success. This isn't just a one and done. We're building a culture here of people, professionals working together in the best interest of students to help them to get them what they need. And that's, regardless of what test or benchmark you use, that's going to have long-lasting positive effects for your school community, for your students. But it takes a while to get used to using the data, and then get used to what kinds of interventions might work in particular areas. And it requires that people share what's working as well, and be willing to share that with their colleagues, which is probably the most powerful professional development you can possibly have, is when someone is doing something that's effective, that works in your own building, and they share that with you, and then you implement it. One, you trust them because you know them. It's not some outside consultant. Not to say there's anything wrong with outside consultants, sometimes they're necessary, but teachers like to learn from other teachers in particular. Having been a teacher myself, I know that to be true.
That's fair. I hear 70%, I hear 1/3 of the kids in that class, that's someone's little girl, someone's little boy.
Right.
that Probably could and should pass, but isn't the minimum standards for the state. And we're still shooting for, here, we got 68%. We're almost to our goal of 70. So I'd love to hear that number go up. I appreciate that we're working towards it, and that's a process, and I understand that. Just make a note that I'd love to hear that number be 80-90%, something like that. Second comment, having those scores up and having I'll call it the 30,000 foot view, Mr. Pinto with the 60,000 foot view, folks are fantastic. As it doesn't matter, we're here to answer those questions. I've been to these for a couple of years now, and having those couple of one-liners is pretty awesome. So, exactly what you're saying, I really like that.
Excellent. All right, moving on to our Director of Finance, Sarah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I prepare my notes for the meeting, I will sit with the financial report and I'll go through line by line and I make notes of anything and then I highlight anything that is new since our last report. And there is nothing new since our last report.
I think we're thrilled to hear that.
I will read through all of my notes if you'd like, but the first thing says there's an overage in the subline, which I brought to your attention in October, so I can read through it if you'd like, or if you have any questions about anything.
I have a question.
Okay.
And it's just an assurance. Are we in good shape to close FY25?
By the skin of our teeth. So we're not in good shape, but we're in shape.
Okay. I will take it. I will take it. Thank you, Sarah. And again, for the extra effort you put in and the time you spent with me and John, above and beyond. Thank you.
Welcome. There are no new grants and awards to be accepted at this time.
Excellent.
And that concludes my report.
I have a motion to accept the Director of Finance's report. So moved. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimously accepted. Thank you, Sarah. Moving on to Dr. Clifford.
Okay, I have two things to talk about tonight, both things I've talked about a lot this year, but I'll first start with math. As you can see in your folder, there's a memo from Brian DeSantis describing the process that we went through this year to do a math curriculum review. We voted on, I think it was April 15th or 14th, K through 6, we're going to go with HMH. We reviewed iReady and HMH from January roughly to April, and we chose HMH. So that's exciting. And also, so that will be grades K through 6, and also the middle school grades 7 and 8 chose HMH too. So the nice piece to that is it'll be a K through 8. HMH will be the program. And right now, what's happened is that we've already put in an order, a promise to pay, and we've also met with HMH, the group, the publisher of that curriculum, and we're putting together professional development, 3 different Zooms, one for K through 2 teachers, one for 3 through 5 teachers, and one for 6 through 8 teachers, which will be an optional Zoom, which they'll offer, and they'll just kind of give an overview, like getting started. We'll tell you about our program and ways that you can, become more familiar with it. The hope is that the materials come in soon. Teachers can look at them and review them over the summer. And I'm also working with Brian DeSantis and Dan Correa to create an implementation plan for that new curriculum, which will be a combination of looking at when units are implemented and also looking at instruction and kind of changing up how we deliver math in some ways. And Pete kind of spoke about this already, making sure that in the schedule we have enough time every day devoted to math, and that we're doing a piece where we do what's called workshop model. It's where you present the lesson, and then you as the teacher and then other people too, if they're in your room, we use a tiered approach to make sure that children are understanding, and we do formative assessment, and we make sure that they understand it before we move on. So it'll be both a new curriculum approach with a new curriculum, but in some ways too, a different instructional modality, which we're going to be doing a lot of professional development, both with staff that we have here, with the publisher coming and doing professional development for us. The first roughly few days at the end of the summer when we have teachers together, we'll be doing professional development, and then we'll be devoting our professional development days during the year to math. So there'll be a lot of work on math next year. I'll talk about English language arts in a minute, but that's the work with math right now. And the good news too is we have both assessments that'll be part of the program and the STAR assessments to do that progress monitoring or that data checking in real time to see how it's going. So hopefully we don't have the year where we're taking a step back, but hopefully a year where we're moving forward, and that will be the goal for that. So that is the math piece. The second piece is the district literacy plan, which Peter spoke about a little bit. This year we had a needs assessment, as you know. Hill for Literacy came in. They basically did an extensive review of everything English language arts K through 12. And we met as a group in March, a literacy team. We created a plan, and different categories were created. An action plan was created, and it's in the folder. And it lays out exactly in the 5 different categories, steps that are going to happen, when they're going to happen. And this begins our work in the fall with a district literacy committee, which we have members from Dennett on that committee. But next year we'll begin a curriculum review for English language arts. My hope is that it will start early in September so that we have plenty of time to do a review of curriculums once we decide. So that will be happening next year. That's the short story on that, but you'll hear me talk about it a lot next year. So,
Any questions for Dr. Clifford? Thank you. All right, Jill, we made it to the end.
All right. First of all, thank you to our school committee and our Plympton community for supporting both the Dennett Elementary School and the Silver Lake budgets this year. Thank you. We appreciate your support and your advocacy. Secondly, I wanted to let you know that on April 22nd, the Board of Education recommended that Secretary Tutwiler appoint Pedro Martinez as our next Commissioner of Education. Also, Governor Healy has established a Massachusetts K-12 statewide graduation council, and they are holding an information session on June 9th from 5 to 7 at Barnstable High School, if this is something that might interest you. And finally, the state announced that DESE intends to release the 24-25 staff attendance data publicly, potentially after the appointment of anticipated Commissioner Martinez in July. So that would be a new piece of data that they haven't presented in the past.
I'm on the State Graduation Council. The progress is slow. There's a lot of stakeholders at the table. I will report back when there's anything tangible to report to the committee. I'm glad that they're doing a lot of outreach. I think it's unfortunate because a lot of what communities are saying is that they want more soft skills embedded in what students are graduating from high school with, and I just really wish they wouldn't call them soft skills. I think that diminishes how important they are. It's more of just a human skill, how to write a resume, how to conduct an interview, how to look someone in the eye and shake their hands are some of the simple but super important things that parents and educators and administrators from around the state are hoping will be included in what we are aspiring for our graduating seniors to have. Speaking of graduation, this Friday evening, weather permitting, graduation at Silver Lake is occurring. It looks like the weather will be decent. We do have a rain date of Saturday, which looks horrible. So I'm hoping to God we can get it off this Friday evening. For Michaela and for all of the graduates and their families, please feel free to drop by and celebrate with us. We have an early release date here at the Dennett on June 5th. The last day of school is Friday the 13th. We also have our Plympton closeout meeting, which we will be holding remotely on July 14th. I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you, Chris, for your time here with us in Plympton and in Silver Lake. I've enjoyed our conversations. I appreciated your tenacity with reaching back to the state for those dollars we were owed, and having the forward-leaning vision to realize that we do need to look at extending some of the programming we offer here at Silver Lake, both for the cost savings it would offer to the 3 towns, but something I know that is very close to the hearts of the committee members here is keeping kids as close to their home communities as possible with the peers they've grown up with and their brothers and sisters. I wish you nothing but luck.
Thank you, and I appreciate the support the board has given me, the school committee has given me for these 2 years. You couldn't ask for better support in your trust, and I thank you.
Thank you. So I will now make a motion for us to adjourn, not to return to regular session, into executive session under MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for contract negotiations with the paraprofessionals, administrative assistant, and executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law for the approval of our executive session minutes of April 28, 2025. Do I have a second?
Second.
And this is a roll call vote. Is there any other business from the administrative side of the table before we conclude?
No.
Seeing none. John?
Yes.
Brian? Yes. Rob?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening.